Today, I'll be going over budgets and different ways to plan for our financial goals for 2024. I have a lot of goals for 2024, and I hope you do too. In order to achieve them, we need systems to help guide and motivate us. That's why we need a budget. Now, the point of a budget is not to deprive you of luxuries and have you live like a peasant. By using a budget, we give our money a job to do, and we can track where our money is going so that we have control over our finances. By creating this habit, we can pay off debt quicker, increase our savings goal, be able to afford the luxuries of life without going into debt, and learn the act of intentional spending. Now, there are 4 different types of budgeting methods. The first one is the 50-30-20 budget. 50% of your take-home pay goes to your needs, 30% goes to your wants, and 20% goes to savings and or debt. Number 2 is the cash envelope system. This system helps keep you out of debt because you're paying everything in cash. Number 3 is the zero-based budget. You end up with 0 at the end of the month because every dollar is allocated for something specific. The 4th type is the pay yourself first budget. This concept is widely talked about in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Unlike the 50-30-20 rule, you put your money aside for your savings, then you divide your take-home pay by your wants and needs. If you're ready to set some financial goals for 2024, grab a drink, download my budget planner, and let's go back to the drawing board. Before we get started with our budget, I would highly recommend doing an audit of your life and your expenses for the last 6 months, if not 1 year. When I did my audit, I personally wrote every single expense down so I could reflect on all of my expenses. This is where a receipt will come in handy. Once you do the audit, you really get to see the numbers and where your money is going at the end of the month. This is where you ask yourself, was it worth it? What happened that made you buy it? And ask yourself if you really needed to make that purchase. Doing this will also show you a lot about yourself, what you spend your money on, the different categories of your expenses, and when your bills are due, whether it's monthly or yearly. The first thing that we're going to do is write down when all of our bills are due for the upcoming year. Here, it's nice to have a calendar layout of when your bills are actually due. You can also add events like birthdays, holidays, vacations, events when you're probably expected to spend some money. So I'll just go ahead and write down when my bills will be due for the upcoming year so that you get an example. Now, when I'm writing down my bills for the upcoming year, I like to use different colored pens so that I can group them together for a sinking fund that I'll show you in a little bit. I do have surgery coming up in February, and I don't know exactly how much this will be, so we're gonna start a medical fund for this, and this would be our first priority for our sinking fund. Alright, so once we've written down all of the expenses for the year, let's go ahead and make a list of the categories for our different types of expenses. Now, in the Expense 2024 Outlook page, we have a few different categories. We have the fixed, we have the fun, the future expenses, we have our year expenses, and we have our variable expenses. Since we already have a list of our yearly expenses, let's just go ahead and put it in. So now that we've listed all of our yearly expenses, let's go over what a fixed expense is. These are our non-negotiables that don't change month after month. Some examples would be rent, your lights, your heating and AC, transportation, and your phone bill. So let me just put mine down and we'll go to the next one. Another tip I have is if you have any form of debt, it would go in this column also. In a separate page, I would write a list of all the debt that I have, the minimum amount, the total balance, and the interest rate. I also have a debt tracker that you can use for each debt that you have. Now, there are 2 ways to tackle your debt, the snowball method and the avalanche method. The snowball method is the method where you make minimum payments and make extra payments on the smallest loan until it's paid, then you move on to the next loan. The avalanche method is where you make the same minimum payments, but you focus on the loan with the highest interest rate first, and you move on to the next one. In my debt-free journey, I used a little bit of both and some balance transfers to pay off $100,000 in debt. I had a $28,000 student loan debt, I paid off 2 cars, I had a $12,000 personal loan that I got just because I was approved, and a bunch of credit cards that accumulated because I wasn't using a budget. So hopefully this helps, and you'd be able to track them and see the amount as it goes down, which is really motivating. The next category is the fun expenses. These are any extra monthly expenses you can have. These are normally in the form of subscriptions and any memberships that you may have on a monthly basis. So let's go ahead and write down our fun expenses and we'll move on to the next one. For the future expenses, this is where the pay yourself first budget comes in. This can be anywhere from your 401k, your stock options, your Roth IRAs, any investments that you have, and also sinking funds. So let's go ahead and write in our future expenses that we have. All right, so in my future fund, I put down my 401k, which is 6%, my stock options, which is 15%. I do have these rest as my funds that I want to put aside for my future. So I do want to max out my Roth IRA, that's $6,500. Since I have surgery coming up in February, I'm going to be putting most of the extra money that I have towards a medical fund before this date. I also have an emergency fund that I want to add $2,500 to, a car fund for $2,000. So the registration, the insurance, the AAA, and any repairs that we may have. Now, the variable expenses are the expenses that are not consistent but do come up over the months. Some examples of this would be food, gas, pups, medical, work, meals, home, clothes, and you can be as specific as you want to. You can have makeup, your shoes, dates, travel, self-care, books, and stationery. And of course, your expenses can change throughout the year, and you can add and subtract things as it suits your lifestyle. Now, one of my financial goals for 2024 is to do a no-spend year. So my non-essentials are basically going to be zero for 2024, with some slight rules that I can abide by. You can also do a low buy or a no-spend for a week or for a month, but I'll talk more about that in another video. But like I said, our budget isn't to restrain us, unless that's what you're looking for. Our budget is to help us spend intentionally. So let's go ahead and fill in our variable expenses. Once you have all of your expenses down, let's go over the goals for 2024. Now for the goals page, I do have 10 different blank spots for any categories of goals that you would like to achieve. Some of those goals can be for financial, career, business, education, personal, lifestyle, physical health, relationships, parenting, home, spiritual, and projects. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill in my goal categories for 2024, and you can do the same. Alright, so these are a lot of goals that I have right now, and I'll just go through them really quick. My finance goals are my main goal, along with business, education, and health. I believe everything else will kind of fall into place once I focus more on this. But for finances, I do want to max out my Roth IRA, which is $6,500, and I also want to do a no-spend year. So now that we have all of our future expenses written down, let's go ahead and see how we can plan to do all of this in the year. Now, I have a few different sinking fund templates that I thought I'd share with you, and you can use what works for you. But the first one I have is for the whole year. You have 5 different categories. Whether you're subtracting or adding, you can do either or. And the other one is where you have your sinking funds here, and you can add the amount as you go along. You're probably thinking, wait, what's a sinking fund? Well, a sinking fund is when you put money aside in a fund for expenses that you know are going to happen. Now, the first sinking fund that you probably already know is an emergency fund. If you haven't heard of Dave Ramsey, you will. He talks about the 7 baby steps, and step 1 is to have a $1,000 emergency fund as a safe buffer in case anything comes up. Now, I know what you're thinking. Should I have an emergency fund if I have debt? And the answer is yes. You still have to have a buffer to keep yourself from using credit cards and getting into more debt to get yourself out of a current situation. So if you're ready to pay off debt, you must first pay your minimum required payment, build up that emergency fund, and then tackle all that debt with gazelle intensity. Now, there are different types of sinking funds that you can have. You can use sinking funds for your vacation, for your wedding, your MacBook Pro that you've always wanted. Now, we already have sinking funds created in the future expenses, so those are going to be created as sinking funds here. So let's go ahead and put that down. Alright, so once we have our sinking funds in, I just added the amount that I already have saved for my emergency fund. And since we have one more paycheck coming in December, I'm going to go ahead and leave this blank because I'm going to put any extra money I have aside for this, and once that's done, I'll go ahead and add that here. So here, let's go ahead and put these same sinking funds into these boxes here, and then we can go ahead and add what we already have. Now, there are 2 options to use this page for the sinking funds. You're going to get your goal amount, which, for example, my medical is $2,000. I'm going to divide the 2,000 by the boxes that we have, which is 12, and each box will have a specific amount. Once you've reached that amount, you're going to write that amount down and color in the box or use a highlighter. Another option is every time you add money to a sinking fund, you're just going to write that amount and color in the box. Since I'm probably not going to have 12 chances to put money into my medical sinking fund before I actually have it in February, I'm just going to put in the amount that I currently have, which is 167. But for my emergency fund, my goal is to add 2,500. My car fund is 2,000. My car repair is 1,000. And my yearly expenses was also 1,000. The MacBook Pro that I did want to get is roughly about 2,000, but this is probably not going to happen for a few months. Now, since I already have an emergency fund of 2,200 and I want to add 2,500 to it, I'm actually going to round up my goal to 5,000 to make it easier for myself. Now we're going to go ahead and divide 5,000 by the amount of boxes, which is 12, and that's going to come out to 416 for every single box. Now, since we already have 2,200, we can just fill in how many boxes we're able to. Now, once you've gone ahead and filled up all your sinking funds and we have our expenses outlook for 2024, we can go ahead and plug in all of that information on our monthly expenses page. You can use this page to track your expenses and do a reset every single month. Now, I don't have a consistent paycheck, so I have to stay on top of my budget for funds. But if you know what you make every month, it's a lot easier. Now that you know what your fixed expenses will be, you can just go ahead and plug that in. You'll know how much you want to save for your future in your sinking funds. The 401k and the stock option will probably be something that you'll get deducted from automatically from your paycheck. You can also do a direct deposit for your Roth IRA, but your medical and any other sinking funds that you may have to manually put that in yourself. In this section, you can go ahead and put how much you put in each sinking fund during that month. And in your variable budget, you can list all of your different expenses that you have. So let's go ahead and take the time to plug all of this stuff in on a monthly basis. Now, in the monthly expenses, you can see these are monthly expenses that I will have no matter what. In the variable budget, I put the ones that I'm planning on spending money on for the upcoming month. And in my sinking fund, I only put my medical fund because that's what our main priority is. Now, once the funds come in, you can write down the different paychecks that you have from your side hustles, from any other funds that you may get, and you can just plug that in here. Like any new habit we want to incorporate into our daily lives, it gets easier with the path of least resistance. You can set things up like autopay, where you save money when you set up autopay, and you usually get a discount on your phone bill, and you also avoid late fees, so that won't have to add to your variable expenses. You can also pay for insurance for 6 months at a time like I do, and have a sinking fund for that already ready when January comes up. You can use tools that you already have to help you make things easier, like your calendar. You can write down every time you make a purchase. You can use budget apps. You can use your bank app. You can use this budget planner that's free to download as my Christmas present for you. And you can start implementing the ideas you've just learned in this video. If there's anything that I missed and you have some great ideas, please share so everyone else can learn. And with that being said, if you want to join me in a no-spend year and you really want to see what kind of relationship you have with money, stay tuned for my next video. If you like this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can follow me along on this journey to financial independence and retire early. See you on the next one.